Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin. I know that this is going to be hard for you to believe, but I was told that when we leave here at 2 o'clock, there's tea and coffee and cake for us. But whatever. I'm also told that every time we put out feed, we all eat it. So anyway, it's going to be there. So even if you're not hungry now, you might be in an hour. For me, on a personal basis, this is a little bit of stardust. Being here as actually introducing Chaim, who I'm going to introduce in a second, to introduce David Grossman. But many years ago, over 35 years ago, I was a young teacher in a school for special education in Jerusalem called Broshim, and we had the incredible opportunity of meeting a young author at the time, David Grossman, who came to sit with the children, and it was an experience. He was already very well known and very well respected, and mentioned a book which I asked him just yesterday if he ever actually wrote, and he didn't yet. And what he told the children at the time was he was going to write a book about being in the zoo during the night and what happens in the zoo with the animals. That was a wonderful occasion for me many years back. It is a huge pleasure. Oh, one more thing before when we leave, I'm not going to get back on the stage because Chaim and David will finish, but when you leave now, this is the time to go and relax and be by the pool, the spa. And at 5:45, the buses are leaving from here to go to the Steboka campus for a wonderful dedication. Immediately from the ceremony, we're going into our barbecue. So dress accordingly. The barbecue's outside, and so that everybody's comfortable. So without further ado, Professor Chaim Weiss, who is the head of Ben-Gurion University's Department of Hebrew Literature. Thank you.
I'm academic. I'm going to use pages and papers. Is it working? It's working. Okay. Hello, everybody. As Jeff said, I'm Chaim Weiss. I'm the head of the Department of Hebrew Literature here. I really ask you all to turn off your cell phones, at least the noisy part of your cell phones. We're going to speak about literature for the next hour, so nothing important is going to happen. So you don't need your cell phones. Just relax and enjoy the conversation. Okay? I'm very honored to host here David Grossman, one of the most well-known and respected Israeli authors. I would like to say that I read all his books, but I want to be modest, so I'll say I read most of his books, and I brought some of them here. About that book, we'll talk in a minute, okay? And I want to congratulate him again for the honorary doctorate that he received yesterday at the beautiful ceremony that we had at Ben-Gurion campus, in the Beersheba campus. David told me to give a short introduction of him, but I won't do exactly what he said. I'll do it a little bit longer than he asked me to. David was David. I'm not going to say David. David was born in Jerusalem, so did I. And he started writing at the beginning of the 80s. I think the first book was 82, Duel.
A little earlier than that, but who cares? I mean, in the 70s, let's say.
Yeah. But I don't think that most of you know, but before he was a famous writer, he was a very popular radio program host. And most of it's called, anybody knows? Chatul Basak, Cat in the Bag. Okay, he was the host of this program. And my generation knew him before we knew that he was a very famous author. We knew that he was a very popular radio host. And we knew his voice before we knew his books. Anyway, I wanted to mention very few of his books, but for the last few weeks, I had a pile of his books on my table, and each one of them looked at me and said, you have to mention me and you have to mention me. So I would mention not most of his books, but not few of them. In 1982, you published Jewel, דו קרב בעברית. After that, you published Sea Under Love. I'll just mention the books. The Yellow Wind, הזמן הצהוב. The Book of Internal Grammar, ספר הדקדוק הפנימי. And for young adults, The Zigzag Child, יש ילדים zigzag. And I want to tell you that my 3 daughters are grateful for that book. And I know that many, you know that the program of literature in Israel is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And יש ילדים zigzag, it's still there. And it's a miracle, but it's still there. Words into Flesh, שתהיה לי הסכין. Someone to Run with, שתהיה לי מישהו לרוץ איתו. Lion's Honey, The Myth of Samson. To the End of the Land, אישה בורחת מבשורה. Falling Out of Time, נופל מחוץ לזמן. A Horse Walked into a Bar. Now, I'll finish in a minute introduction. David won many, many, many prizes. I would not mention all of them. That would take the whole hour. But he won in 2001 the Sapir Prize for someone to run with, 2004 Bialik Prize, Emet Prize, Man Booker International Prize for Horse Walked into a Bar. He got it with his beautiful, great translator, Jessica Cohen. In 2018, he got the Israel Prize. And then this year, I think, you got the Erasmus Prize. And a doctorate honor here at Ben-Gurion. Okay, before we start, I want to start with a short story, and then we move to the interview. I want to tell you a short story about the first book of David that I read. The year was 1988. I was a young soldier. I served in the Golan Heights, and when I got a vacation, it was something like once in 3 weeks. I went to a small used bookstore. It was located in one of the ugliest buildings in Jerusalem, Binyan Klal. It's called Klal building. The name of the store was Bookstore. It's a bookstore its name was Bookstore. And I used to walk in the store and pick like 10 books and take them with me to the army and read them. And I got across this book, Sea Under Love. This is the exact copy that I bought there. And I took it with me to the army, and I read it, and actually I didn't read it, I swallowed it. I read it without, I had to do some army chores, but I read it the whole time. This was one of those very few books that every reader has that defines him as a reader. This is a book that defines me as a reader. And it was the first time that I read a book about the Holocaust which I could understand and identify with. And I think I'm not the only one. I think it's a whole generation thing. My generation needed a book about the Holocaust that we can read and identify with. I could see myself in the character of Momik, the hero of the book, the child who tries to grow a Nazi monster in his basement. But I also could see and understand the other characters. I had Dod Yoshi, Uncle Yoshi, and Aunt Eva, and Aunt Piri, and Uncle Yoshua, and they were all characters from your book. I really knew them. They were exactly as you described them in the book. And this was the second generation book that I read. So after many years, I want to thank you on behalf of that young man that read your book. You gave me a very precious gift back then. So thank you very much. And now we'll move. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'll finish talking and we'll move to you. So I'll ask you.
Maybe before we start, can I ask just to lower a little the lights? I'm willing to confess everything without this torment. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes. I'm willing to confess as well. So if somebody can. We are not that important. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Different writers describe, each one in his own way, the experience of writing. You know, as readers, we really are interested to go into the this magical room in which the author writes his book. Now, Amos Oz used to describe himself as a grocery store owner. He said, I'm sitting in my grocery store. If a client comes, he comes. If he doesn't come, he doesn't come. I'm sitting there I'm opening it in 8 o'clock and I'm closing it at 5, and that's it. It's open for that duration. Chaim Be'er, my dear friend, you usually speak about an experience of loneliness. He feels lonely and he cannot write here. He has to go somewhere else. Italy, United States, England, usually very beautiful places, but he has to write somewhere else. Now, in interviews, you speak a lot about the pleasure of writing. You really enjoy, sometimes it's a painful pleasure, but you really enjoy writing.
Yes, I do, and I even enjoy suffering. Before I answer you, I just want to say how happy I feel to be here on stage and in these wonderful days that you gave my wife and myself, and to be a part of this endeavor of recognizing the achievements of some people and being a part from now on with the University of Beersheba, which I only once was here years and years ago. And I feel the more I'm here, the more I feel how this is a hungry university in the sense that it's passionate. It wants to change, and it believes in its power to be changed and to mold generation after generation of young people. I will not say that I don't feel this urge of hunger in other universities, because they have their advantages and passion. But here somehow it's very, very conspicuous. You can feel it in the people, you can feel it in the ideas that I had over the years. And I think it shows itself also in this, how can I call it? This endeavor of giving the doctorates of honor to certain individuals. So thank you very much for your hospitality and for your spirit. Thank you. Thank you. Chaim, as to your question, I love to write because it's my way of not only understanding the world, but also of being in the world. I know that there are so many things in life that I will not understand until I will write them, until I will put them in a form of a book, of a story, not of a book, of a story. The place of the story in my life is very, very important. We might talk about it later, how in every novel that I've written, there is a person who is telling stories to other person and being changed by this telling of the story. I love this act of searching for the most nuanced way to describe a situation. I feel that the situation today in Israel, and not only in Israel, in the whole world actually, is of thickening. The world becomes thick. And what we do, what writers and artists do, is to insist on nuances. Really to fight for nuances, because there is life and truth in the nuances which you cannot find in the thickening layer of reality. And the more the situation aggravates, situation hamatzav we call it, yes, the political, the military situation here, the more I feel the need to be able to regain the nuances that have been deprived of, we have been deprived of because of years of war, years of occupation. And it's, for me, a very strong motivation, a very strong fuel that keeps me going. Okay, I'll not talk. I will talk about it later, but I don't want to answer too long answers.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a painful enjoyment, writing, and I can really understand that the need or the urge to gain, I don't know, to be able to hold the truth in its all complexity, not to tell one story, but to tell many stories, because reality is composed from many different realities. Now, you are some kind, you're not, we have authoritative authors. They're standing there and they have their story. I can give examples, but I won't do it. But they're standing there with all their power and telling this story that they want to tell. You are not like that. You are kind of more marketplace storyteller. That means it's in a very good sense, I'm saying it. That means that you hear the voices around you, you collect them, and you create different characters. And I have many questions in regard to that ability. Is there any character that you cannot create?
You know, usually whenever I see a human being that is far away from me, that lives different life, I immediately feel this urge to understand him or her from within. There are so many others that I don't know, that I cannot guess even the way they think, the way they feel. And it always creates really a thirst in me to try to be another human being. And when I say be, I don't mean to impose myself or my inner constitution upon this individual, but to be able to release myself from my anguishing, burdening personality, and to allow another human being to pour into me and to prevail inside me. And I always have this story that, excuse me if you heard me saying it before, but there was a moment in my life that I cannot forget, and it was when I was writing Isha Borachat Mibsora, to the end of the land in English. And Isha Borachat Mibsora, it's a story about Ora, who is a 50 years old Israeli woman who has 2 sons, and she lives separately from her husband. And her son is being taken to a military operation, and she has a very deep guess or intuition that something bad will happen to him. And she starts to think how to avoid the notifiers of the military who will come in the middle of the night and knock on her door to give her the bad news. And then she understands that it takes 2 for bad news, one to deliver and one to receive. And what if she is not there to receive? Maybe the whole wheel of notification would be turned back. Maybe she will gain another hour until they find her, or a minute, even a minute counts at such situation. And she runs away from home, and she runs away from the notification. I was writing it for 3.5 years, and I was stuck. I was unable to find the character of Ora. I lost the ability not only to understand her, which is easy, but to know her, really to know like Adam knew Eve, in the biblical sense, you know, to know, to prevail in all her inner spaces, as it should be when you write a character. And then I saw that I'm losing this novel, that I will not be able to write it. And I did, out of despair, I did something strange, but for me understandable. I wrote her a letter. I wrote Ora a letter. Dear Ora, I wrote, why are you like that? Why don't you surrender to me? And the moment I wrote, why don't you surrender to me, it pierced me. How stupid I was, because it's not Ora who has to surrender to me. It is me who have to surrender to her. Totally to surrender, to remove all mechanisms of defense, all the walls that buffer between me and herself, or myself through her. And once I understood it, once I just surrendered to her and allowed her to pour, really to come into me, suddenly the book started to be ignited again. Suddenly the book was writing itself, and as it happens rarely, but it happens in some of the stories, I just had not to interfere, not to impose my inner constitution on her, but to surrender totally to her constitution, even in times that she annoys me or she contradicts me even. And then from that moment on started the pleasure of writing, not the struggle that sometimes accompanies the process of writing. And it goes like that for all characters. All characters, when I write, it can be a human being, it can be a dog, like in Someone to Run With. There is such a pleasure, a real pleasure in stopping being entrenched, but allowing yourself to be, to massage your ego, to melt it, not to be stuck in it or by it, to have this flexibility of the movement of the mind, of the brain, of the body, of everything that makes us one, and to allow us to feel how many selves inhabit us, every one of us. So there are so many to your question. I'm sorry for the long answer, and you see now why I write such heavy novels and not haiku poems. But these are really the moments of sheer happiness, that suddenly you touch another human being from within, and he or she responds, and I'm able to listen to the story. And you are right about the place of the storytelling in my books, because I deeply believe in the power of telling the story anew, the power of such a story being told anew in the process of changing oneself, or sometimes even to recover from something that you are trapped in. And in every book that I've written, as I told you, there is someone who tells a story to another human being. And I think that we all, every one of us, we have our story, the official story that we tell others when we meet them. And usually it's one of those legislative stories of our life, usually from our childhood, how our parents did not understand us, how our siblings did not know us, how our friends, teachers, zeitgeist, of how nobody understood us. There is always some ingredient of insult in this situation. But I feel that through writing, I can allow a character in the book to retell his or her story, which always inevitably are my story, I'm sorry to say. And to tell them in a new way. It can be a very small change in the way of the telling. But there is a change. And the change allows flexibility and allows fresh water to pour in. Because suddenly you take a scene that you were accustomed to describe in a certain way and in a certain emphasis, and you change the emphasis. You put new words. You give in. You pour into the story new words, and suddenly you see the whole situation anew. Suddenly you start feeling that, well, maybe also Mama had a Mama. Yeah. Yes. Maybe she has her reasons to be the one she is now, that sometimes drive us crazy. And even Papa has the right for psychology. Yeah, not only us, the sophisticated people, have the right for psychology, but also our parents do. And when we do it, suddenly there is such a movement of liberty, of inner liberty. And I'm talking about individuals and the change that it can bring into their lives, but of course it applies to nations. And every nation has this official legislative story or stories or mythological stories. And every nation used to educate the children of this nation from birth almost about the national myths. And we do not really feel, we surrender to these official stories, but we do not feel to what extent we have become trapped in these stories. And they are our prison, and they forbid us to understand to what extent we are in a different place now. We do not have to tell those old stories in the old way. We can retell them now in new words. We can be more free when describing them. We are not trapped within them. We are not a victim of our legislative stories. And when we do it, nothing bad can happen. You know, we can allow the narrative of our enemy even to infiltrate into our official story. It will not ruin, it will not demolish our official story. It will not hurt our identity. On the contrary, it will make our identity richer and deeper when it will be in touch not only with our nightmares or wishful thinking, but it will be in touch with the complexity of reality. And if both sides, the two opponents or adversary or enemies, will be exposed to the real narrative of the other, and I hate the word narrative. Narrative is a human being's story or a human story that has congealed, that has fossilized. And again, what we have to do is to massage the narrative of us, of our enemies, to massage constantly. And only if we do it, if we really massage it sincerely and courageously, only then it's the beginning of a real dialogue between us and them.
Thank you very much. I have many questions about what you said about the prices that you pay when you insist on telling all kinds of stories in a society that maybe the basic fight or debate in Israeli society is about who has the right to tell a story and who doesn't have the right to tell a story. Do you think, because it's not only a literary decision or, I don't know, it's also a moral decision. You decide that everybody has a story and you want to tell his or her story. And I'm tempted to ask whether you are paying a price for that, because you don't only tell nice stories or easy stories. One of your characters I want to mention in Ayen Erchava, in Sea Under Love, is a Nazi officer. And you gave him a story. He has a story there. And I'm not returning to the question that is there anybody who doesn't own or has the right for a story, but whether there's a price for it.
If there is a price, it's worth it. It's worth it, and it's important for, even from egoistic interests. We need to know that the world consists of stories of so many other people, and the more educational, I'm not sure I stand 100% behind this word, but the educational role of literature is to show us exactly what I just described. You know, the fact that everyone has his or her story, and that listening to this story is something that can enlarge us and makes our existence richer and deeper and more moral, as you said.
Thank you. I want to turn to something, it's not really different because it stems from the discussion we just had, but your interest in different characters made you it's a rare case. You write to all ages. There are very, very few writers that can write to children, young adults, and adults. And David, I don't have to mention it here, but he's a very loved children author.
No, you can mention it.
Yeah, I know. I'm being, you know, it's a reverse psychology, but I'm mentioning it. It's like mentioning something twice, you know that. And so he's a very loved, you can find the Itamar series, Itamar Walking on Walls, Itamar Meets a Rabbit. And I want to ask you, it might be seen as an easy question, but it's not. What's the difference? How is it like to write for children versus writing to adults? Because the worlds that you create in children's book are different from the world that you create in the novels that you write.
Yes, they are different, maybe because of this paternal or faternal instinct to protect.
I would just say your children's books are very protected. The children's in your book are very protected. They are going to a journey. They are going out for a journey. They are climbing the walls and going into a picture. But they are always surrounded by protecting, loving, caring parents and adults that's around them. And we all know, and the children know, that the journey would end in a good way.
Yeah.
Positively.
Yes, definitely. I think my books for grown-ups are quite are different in that sense, and more exposed to reality with all its dangers and sometimes atrocities. And I think children deserve to be protected until a certain age. by the way, I do not think that they are totally protected. Even, you know, when in the story of Itamar walks on walls, there is a story about a young lion that disappeared, and his parents are desperate and crying and looking for him. So the child understands, or he gets also this nuance of sorrow, of loss, of fear. But as you said, when I write for children, I always have in my mind this family scene when the parent is reading the story to the child. And these are very precious moments, and I remember them from my being a father, and later from my being a grandfather. Because in these 10, 15 minutes, all the tension of the world can evaporate for some time. And all the usual debates and anger between the parent and the child. You promised me to do that. I told you to reorganize your room. You didn't take a shower. All these questions that we know from the usual family theater. Suddenly they evaporate, they disappear. And what is the story that will tell the child about another reality. And the child immediately recognizes, and I remember it from my children, recognizes it, that the parent tells him or transfers him into another level, another layer of reality, that it's not totally real reality, and it's not a dream, it's something that happens in between. Even the language is a little different. And it's very, for me, it's important when I write that in every book there will be one or two words that are not familiar to the child, that he will make, or she will make the effort to understand them, to decode them. Because I remember when I was a child that my father and mother read to, and there were words that I did not know. And my father said, "Do you want me to tell you what is this word?" And I said no. Because I like that the words, the undecodable words continue to flicker in the darkness. And I always think that the moments before going to sleep are quite a moment of crisis for a child. We tend to forget it because the night brings darkness and shadows, and a sleeve of a shirt can look like a trunk of an elephant, and there are dreams and there are nightmares, and suddenly the child understands that the father cannot penetrate into the dream and rescue the child from the nightmare, that he is alone or she is alone in the nightmare. And the child hears his siblings or his parents continue their life in the other rooms, and the voices come differently. And maybe the child, without of course knowing it, it's something that might happen only 20 years later, he understands how life was without him or her. Because of that, when I write for children, I want them to be enveloped by some warmth and protection before he or she sails into these unpredictable events of the night. And the other reasons for writing for children is that I'm raising up a new generation of readers, you know, from the age of 4.
It's a smart investment.
It's investment, yes.
Yes, that's it. I'm sure that you're. Do you think about the parents when you write for children? You want the parents to enjoy the story?
Yes, I think it's important that the parent gives the story to the child. That as parents, we do not just stick an iPad or a phone in their hands and click and say, listen to it. I think that the physical proximity and the fact that the father or the mother are there and they are part of the process and they can do as much as they can in order to protect the child, it is very, very important. And I must say that it's important also for the parent who reads the story, because I remember, for example, when my father read to me, and my father was then a very authoritative person for me, but he read the stories and he was clever enough to enjoy the reading and not to read too quickly just to get rid of this duty. But I looked at him and I was able to catch some glimpse of the face of my father when he was a child. You see, because also the parent gets the chance to bereft himself or herself from all the defense mechanism and just to flow with the story.
Yes. These are really precious moments. I remember them from when my daughters were young. That's the moment. Eventually, they don't hear the story anymore. They just hear the sound of your voice and the sound of the words that they know already. And because of that, they like to hear again and again and again and again the same story, because the music of the story soothes them and helps them to do this complicated process from giving up. You have to give up. You have to give up on something when you go to sleep, because you have to let go. And that's a complicated thing. I want to go back to the public storyteller, or the role of a storyteller in our society. Since I'm a scholar of urban literature, and I try to look on the big picture, and there's some kind of a change. Writers, young writers today are not willing, or most of them are not willing or not trying to take a public stand. They hardly stand in front of the people and say what they want to say. Now, in Hebrew literature, we have a long tradition, very, very long tradition, since the beginning of Hebrew literature. I know that you don't like the word, we just talked about it before, a prophetic role. It's not exactly prophetic role, but it's a role in which the author is standing in front of his people and say what he thinks. He uses the stage that he has to warn the people, to encourage them, I don't know, to talk to the people, and to use his ability to write and talk and speak to make a difference. And it's a complicated role, because it's completely different than the idea of a writer who sits alone in his room somewhere writing his novels, and nobody knows anything about him until he's publishing the novel, and he's trying. This is a romantic notion of a writer sitting in the dark in a very alone in his room and writing. How do you manage, because you are doing both, so how do you manage to do both of them? What do you think about it?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
First, I think that sometimes I'm being asked about the duty of the writer to tell about the reality and to try to change this reality. I think that a writer has only one duty, and this is to tell a good story. And there are wonderful writers in Israel who do not deal with politics, and still they write very good, wonderful sometimes stories. It's a matter of personality, I think. It's a matter of people who take reality more closely, more personally, intimately, and feel that they need to change something. I myself, I can tell you about myself, I take the world very seriously. And I don't like it when people try to impose formulations on me, words on me, when people try to pollute my life by advocating a certain reality that seems to me totally distorted and destructive. And I also feel that if I write about a human being today, a man or a woman or a child today in Israel, I cannot avoid writing about this reality in which he or she lives. It is such a strong part of our being, the political situation, the military situation, the fears, the suspicion, all the qualities that are engraved in us because of this horrible situation we are trapped in for so many years. I find it difficult to avoid that or to ignore it. And personally, I want to be part of this reality and to try to improve it. I feel every day that my reality is being polluted, and not only polluted, but even confiscated by others who have totally contradictory interests and ideology. And in my opinion, they are dangerous to the Israeli that I wish to see, and I wish that my children and granddaughters will live in. You know, it's not that writers know more than other people about the future or about the present even. We don't have these abilities, not at all. But we have one or two things that make us more helpful in the change or the attempt to change the situation. The first is the sensitivity to the language. The language is the thing that is being manipulated and forged firstly in situations that are distorted. There are all kinds of big systems that have an interest in the manipulation of the language, systems like the military, like court sometimes, like the press sometimes. And it's important to stand on guard and to see when words are being used in a wrong way, in a manipulative way. And the second thing, which is in the heart of literature, and we spoke about it when we began our talk, is that it sharpens your sensitivity to the being of the others. You understand really that every human being is a whole world, and it's not just a phrase or a cliche. Every one of us is a whole world. And literature is something that can give you this feeling, because suddenly you feel that part of you is like this person that you read about in the book. And it's not so foreign to you, and it's not so detached from yourself. And had you been in his or her place, you would have acted maybe in the same way. Not exactly the same way. I hope nobody will act in a violent way, but in a kind of a civilian passive resistance without using power. But it teaches us to look at reality in somewhat different way. And it's also, now when I say it, I think it's also the ability to describe the situation and to insist on these nuances and to insist on granting the other, even if enemy, granting him or her the right to be different and the right to be himself, not to be the one we want to impose on him. And to describe the situation with as many nuances as possible, it means that you have in yourself the power to throw yourself into the future, that you are not trapped in this dead-end situation. And if you throw yourself like, you know, somebody is throwing an anchor from his reality that is clumsy and dirty and cruel and with all the bad qualities, but you have the ability to throw this anchor into the future, and then you start to pull yourself slowly towards this future. That means that you still have in yourself some enclave of hope, some enclave of liberty, and that you can still use it in order to salvage yourself from the situation. You are not doomed to be crushed by this situation. You are not doomed to be crushed by hopelessness, by suspicion, by animosities. There might be another way to live this life, and this is something I so deeply wish for us and for the Palestinians, that they will be able and we shall be able to live the life we deserve to live, not to live the life that we feel that there is a sword hanging above our heads, that we are doomed to kill or to be killed, and as if there is no other way. There is other way. I don't know for how many years, but still there is a way that we shall start to live normal life, which will be also life of freedom. Yeah. Sorry for the long speech.
There are moments in interview. I have so many other questions, but this is a good point to stop, and I don't know. Really hope that literature. I really believe in the power of literature. First of all, I have no other powers, so I believe in the power of things that I can do, and I don't believe in the power of things that I cannot do. But people still read books. People are interested in books. Literature is important, and see, the room is full, and people are coming to hear you. And I'm a very naive person, but I really believe that literature, art, culture can change the reality in which we live in. And we have, and I want to thank you very, very, very much. First of all, yes, אנחנו מלומדים בעניין. I know the drill. I want to thank you very, very much for joining us, and most of all, I want to thank you for your lovely books and great books, and I really hope that you would continue doing exactly the same thing that you've been doing all those years, writing books, because my kids grew up on your children's books and young adults, and now they're starting reading your novels, so thank you very much, and we have a few minutes, like 3 or 4 minutes for 1 or 2 questions. If somebody has a question, yes, please, Jean-Marie.
May I ask you, what type of books do you read? What other writers do you like, even in the past, or of course other countries, other cultures?
I like reading very much, and it's always a very enlivening experience to read the book that I like and the book that I appreciate. I read mainly Israeli literature, because these are the people I know personally, and I'm interested in the process they are going through. But Israel is very surprising also, among other things, in the amount of translated books. I just come back from United States, and I learned there that the amount of books that are translated to American English is 3% of all the books that are being published there. And I think it's a bad sign for a society that buffers itself and closes itself and allows only 3% of world literature to infiltrate into their narrative, because it enhances the narrative, it enhances the dialogue, and it minimizes you if you're exposed only to one kind of literature. So I will not mention names, but Israel is amazing in the boom of new writers, young writers. Just today, I mean today, not just today, there are 5 generations who are constantly writing together, you know, from the age of 21 to the age of 95 or 94. And it's really very hopeful to see this development. Yeah.
I'll just add to what David said. In Israel, you know how many books are being published every day? Literary books, not cooking books. In Israel every day, 10 books. Now, even if only 2 of them are good, that's a lot. So a lot of people are writing, and I'll use the stage to say, you can come to our creative writing program and to see how many people are interested in writing, have something to say, really wish to study how to write. And I'll just mention that Shimon Adaf, the head of our program, in his first class says, if you want to write, please read. So, yeah. And one more question, yes?
When you write a book from the perspective of the other, what tools do you use to get into the psyche of the other?
All the possible ways. I think the answer is very simple. To totally surrender, as I said before, to dedicate myself totally to another human being. Everything, you know. Once when I was writing Someone to Run With, מישהו לרוץ איתו, I had the character of Tamar. Tamar is the main, the main hero of this book, and she's 16 years old, woman or girl or in between. And I knew very much about her, but I didn't feel her. Again, like with the story with Miriam before, with Ora before, the woman who is escaping from the news. And I felt that I cannot continue writing this book unless I understand her and becoming a 16 years old woman. And that was really harsh. And then one day when I entered the computer store in the mall near the place where we live in Mevaseret Zion, I saw a girl, and she was 16, she looked 16. I saw her from the side as if I was standing here. This is me, the camera see only her, half of the face, and her jaw that was a mixture of softness and toughness and defiance. And I looked at her from behind and I felt this is my Tamar. She stands like her, she was moving like her. And immediately before she asked the person who was selling there, before she asked him something, before I heard her voice, because I did not need her voice, I had her voice already in my mind, and I didn't want it to her body to spoil it. It's horrible to be a writer, believe me. And I came out of the store immediately, not to be there, and suddenly I had her. So I don't know if it answers your question, but it's an act of just opening up as much as one can in order to be together, to be with capital B, to be another human being. It's such a pleasure. You know, we are so used and programmed even to be entrenched in front of others, even others who are close to us. Over the years, we congeal, we fossilize. And the act of writing, the act of creation is just the opposite. You know, you just want to be totally, to belong totally even to another human being. You will say imaginary, yes, but it's imaginary in a way that is so real and so tangible that sometimes it's more real than connections with living human beings.
Just add, I'm living in close proximity to writers for more than 20 years. And I can tell you, be aware of writers. They are the combination of intelligence officer and simple thieves. They would take anything from you the minute they see you, talk to you, and speak to you. They would take everything that they need. They are working all the time. They are not resting for a minute. They are working all the time in the supermarket, in a grocery store, sport shop, playground. They are working all the time. And they are looking at us all the time. So beware of writers.
Hi. I don't know how I got the courage to ask you this question, but I remember last year I'm studying here in the Midrasha, Nizda Buker, in Israel Histories and Zionism. And coming from Jordan is not really easy to be allowed to know about the other perspective. So I remember that I saw your video talking about accepting the other perspectives. And in my mind, I thought, for you as a writer, like this is my question now, for you as a writer, was it easy for you or not? Like, how was the process of you opening up and showing your real perspective to other people? Okay. Okay, I lost my idea because I'm really stressed, but again, I'm from Jordan. So, being part of the other perspective is really hard for me as a human. I feel like maybe my people, my community won't respected enough or won't even accepted or won't even let me have the ability to be part of it because they are really judgy, they are really whatever, okay? So for you as a writer who has a voice, how was it for you to show the other perspective, and how was it for you as a part of your process of being a writer all these years?
Well, first, thank you for the question. I feel that I answered it in quite many ways in this conversation. But I tell you about a book that I wrote almost 30 years ago, I think, in '87, which was called The Yellow Wind, Azman Atzahov. In Arabic, it is Azman al-Asfar. And in this book, I left my home and went into the occupied territories, and I spent there 9 weeks describing the reality, the reality of the occupation, the reality that Many Israelis knew about it, but they did not want to know, and they suppressed it, and they denied it. They knew it only as soldiers, reservists who went to serve in the occupied territories. Even we were not allowed to say the occupied territories. It was the held territories, the liberated territories, never mentioned occupation. And I say it as an anchorman of the most popular radio show in Israel, the morning show, the Boker Tov Israel. I used to broadcast for 4 years this program. When I was writing The Yellow Wind, I finished broadcasting the news, the official governmental news, took my car and drove to the occupation where totally another vocabulary and grammar prevailed. And I was stunned. I thought I knew, and I knew nothing. And I remember the feeling, the physical feeling of going back after spending yet another day in the occupied territories, going in the street of Ben Yehuda, in the heart of Jerusalem, downtown Jerusalem. And I looked at people and I thought, you don't know what is ticking and burning half an hour beside you. You are totally unaware of the reality in which you live your life. You are like, children who are totally naive and cannot really even imagine the immense of insult, of bitterness, of vengefulness that is bubbling on the other side. And I wrote this book, as I said, The Yellow Wind it was called. And I can say that for some months there was a new, let's say, a new vocabulary in the Israeli public arena. But it was not enough. I wrote it. Later, of course, it was contradicted by the right wing, and reality came, and things started to deteriorate in a much more ugly way and crazy way and extreme way. And yet, if there will be every now and then a writer, and I say a writer, someone who deals with the words that describes or hide reality, and not myself because my opinions are already known, but someone who will come fresh to the situation and allow the situation to act upon him or her and change him or her. This is the only way to keep the situation still bubbling and alive, and not to allow anyone to hide it under the carpet.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. I want to thank David Grossman again, and I wish you many, many years of writing and good health. And thank you all for joining us today. Now, I want to show you something. This is the writer's house at Be'er Sheva. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. You are all invited to come and visit it. It's already working. It's a house for literature and culture. It's the fulfillment of the dream of many, many good people in Ben-Gurion University. Yigal Schwartz, the head of Heksherim Center, the president of the university, Professor Dani Chamovich, and the rector, Professor Chaim Ames, and of course, and above all, Tony Young. I would dare say, I don't use those words usually. I'm I'm keeping my words, but she is the great protector of Hebrew literature in Ben-Gurion University, and we all thank her.